Okay, 2022 draft first round retrospective. It's actually a really interesting draft because if you remember, there wasn't a ton of great quarterbacks in this draft class, but there was a lot of good edge rush prospects that created for some really interesting dialogues. So yeah, without further ado, well, I guess a little bit further ado, I think the one other interesting thing about these players is they're all entering the last year of their rookie deal. So we're starting to see some of these guys get extensions and things of that nature. So yeah, without further ado, now let's get into it. So the first 5 picks, 3 edge rushers and 2 corners, and there was plenty of discussion with all of these guys as to where they should rank. The Jaguars made the controversial choice of selecting Travon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. Now, Travon Walker, a player who, when he was drafted, was this sort of, guy who people essentially hated that were in the analytics community. His analytics were not good at all. In fact, his analytics were that of like a 3rd round pick. That being said, he had incredible athleticism, and you did see flashes on the football field of him having success. He has over 10 sacks each of the past 2 seasons. Well, actually, exactly 10 sacks 2 years ago, and then 10.5 sacks this most recent year. Again, you look at some of the analytics, they're actually not bad. They're not bad. He's been an effective player, like no matter what way you slice it. But how effective is up for debate, right? I think that the Jaguars, teams would be happy to have Travon Walker. He's a good player at this point, which I'll be honest, I didn't know if that was going to happen. I did say when you get a guy like that, usually the 3rd year is when you have kind of when they become who they are. It takes about 3 years for a developmental edge rusher, and for that, he's developed, and he's been a good player for them. He has not been Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson looked like he was on pace to be Defensive Player of the Year last year. Aiden Hutchinson's just on another level and should have been drafted first overall. But both teams did end up with good players. But yeah, Lions very happy with who they have, I think. And I don't think the Jaguars are devastated with who they have. Next, and I'll go to Kayvon Thibodeaux now just because we're talking edge rushers. He's someone who I think has been a bit underwhelming. He was, considered to be better than Travon Walker by most coming out of college and ultimately fell to 5. Giants felt very happy about selecting him at pick 5. But ultimately, you just have to wonder a little bit, how good is he? He's been an effective player, but he has not quite been at Hutchinson's level. I think you could argue he's been at Walker's level. I think it depends on, again, what do you value? Do you like the guy who's going to win more consistently, which Thibodeaux will, or do you like the guy that when he wins, he's going to truck over an offensive lineman and get straight to the quarterback? If you like that guy more, even if it's less consistent, then you'd rather have Walker. The corners at picks 3 and 4. Again, the Texans going with Derek Stingley Jr. over Sauce Gardner was a hot take at the time, and most people thought Sauce Gardner was the better player. Year 1, it looked horrible for Houston. Stingley took some time to get going, and Gardner was great right off the bat. Last year, though, I think Stingley was much better than Sauce Gardner. Again, both guys are great players. I think the Jets and Texans both feel great, and corner's a fluky position. You'll have good years and bad years, so I think both are great players. You can take your pick as to who you'd rather have at pick 3 or pick 4, but the Texans pick Stingley at 3 and feel good about it. Next 5, weirdly similar in that we have just 2 different positions here. 3 tackles and 2 receivers. Akeem Ekwonu, who's been a good tackle for the Panthers. He's kind of, I think, slowly gotten better year after year. He came into the league all right and consistently been playing better. So, been a very good pick here at 6. They're happy to have him. Evan Neal at 7. Again, for the poor Giants fans who thought they were getting a couple stars with Evan Neal's and Kayvon Thibodeaux. Again, Thibodeaux's been an effective player. I think they're still happy with Thibodeaux. Is it worth a 5 overall pick? That can be debated, but he's been a good player. Evan Neal hasn't. I think he had his best year last year in 500 snaps. He looked maybe not a complete mess, but ultimately has just not been what they were hoping they were getting. Again, there was a subsect of people who, loved Evan Neal because he was kind of similar to Travon Walker in that he had just this eye-popping athleticism, especially for his height and all of that stuff, but ultimately doesn't always work out getting the hyper athlete, and that's kind of and he had better analytics too, so it's not all that, but sometimes it doesn't work out. Charles Cross for the Seahawks, again, we'll skip over Jake London just for a second to finish the tackles. really good for the Seahawks. Been a very good player. They're very happy to have him. For the receivers, Drake London and Garrett Wilson. Again, both have been good. I think Drake London has been the better player. I think the Falcons are happy they made the pick that they made, and I actually think he's kind of really an underrated player for the Falcons. Garrett Wilson, though, again, kind of struggled with the chemistry with Rodgers last year, but has still shown to be an effective player, even in bad situations. Next, 5. So we have Chris Olave with the Saints at pick 11, another receiver who has shown to be very effective. Unfortunately, he's got these injury issues now, so I think that's the concern that you have with him. And then Jameson Williams at pick 12, who again, I mean, is someone who I think is a really effective player when he's on the field. Definitely has the off the field issues, or just judgment issues, we can say, with the gambling thing. Has had an injury as well. They knew that going into the draft, that he was going to miss the start of the year due to injuries. Is not a great quarterback. Did not make the best decision there. So, there's that. But he's an effective player. Again, the Lions are happy to have him at 12. And then 13, the Eagles with Jordan Davis. I think the criticism of Jordan Davis is he doesn't play a ton, and maybe his wins are not as frequently as you would like, but when he wins in a big way. So, again, is an effective player. This is not the best draft pick the Eagles have had recently, especially one Kyle Hamilton, one pick later, who has, again, the criticism. I was the one person who just didn't think he was a great player, so I completely whiffed on that. Most people thought he was a great player, but didn't think that you should draft a safety at 14. Well, if the safety's great, it looks like a great pick, and that the Ravens can show that. Houston Texans selected Kenyon Green at pick 15. They have traded him this past offseason after he struggled, although they did get a starting safety out of it. So they didn't trade him for nothing. But yeah, definitely not a pick that they look back and say, oh yeah, we nailed that one. Next 5 here. So we have first Jahan Dotson, who, hey, had a big catch in the Super Bowl. That's pretty good for a 16th overall pick, right? Well, not when it's for a team that is a division rival and not your own team. Of course, they moved off of him. He did have a big play for the Eagles in the Super Bowl, but ultimately, that is a pick they would like to have back, I'm sure. The Chargers with Zion Johnson. I think at the time, I called Zion Johnson like the most obvious, like, oh yeah, he'll be a solid guard for like 15 years. And that seems like what he's going to be. Just a solid, like pretty good guard for a long time. Been effective there. Treylon Burks, who I will say I think has gotten a little bit underrated. Not to say that I think he's great or even like a good player. I think usually he's kind of used as a punchline for, could you believe the Titans traded away A.J. Brown just to select Treylon Burks? But he was at least a role player for his first 2 seasons, and then unfortunately was injured all of last year. So like, yeah, I mean, I get that, like, okay, the A.J. Brown trade really blew up in their faces, but doesn't mean that he's a disastrous player. Still don't know if he's worth the 18th overall pick, though, even all that considered. And I would just say he's not, probably. But still, that's kind of how I view that. Trevor Penning, who, again, is not the worst tackle in the world, but is honestly, if he's your starting tackle, you don't feel great about that. You would like to have an upgrade there, is how I see it. Kenny Pickett at pick 20. Again, another guy who the Steelers ultimately moved off of just after a couple years. Again, they needed a quarterback. It wasn't a great quarterback draft. One fell to 20. They said, okay, let's take a shot, but ultimately just didn't work. Next, 6 here. So we're going to go 6 by 6 for the last 2, just because there's 32 picks in the first round, so that's how we have to do it. First at pick 21, kind of famously, the Chiefs trading with the Bills, getting pick 31 here and selecting Trent McDuffie, who has been, he was a player who wasn't considered as good of a player as Kyer Elam, wasn't considered as good of a prospect, but boy did the Chiefs nail that one. First turning him into an all-pro winning slot corner, and I shouldn't say turning him into, he turned into a all-pro slot corner, and as an outside corner has still shown to be a really good player there. The Bills, Kyer Elam, it's just been a miss. In fact, they ended up just moving off of him for peanuts. He's on the Dallas Cowboys now, so that's why those little things. I mean, if that in that AFC Championship game, if Trent McDuffie's playing for the other team, that might be the difference in that game, to be honest. Quay Walker at pick 22, been able to stay on the field for a while. In my opinion, hasn't shown a lot. Was kind of a weird pick at the time, and has kind of turned into a weird pick, in my opinion. Tyler Smith, really good tackle for the Cowboys, and really good guard for the Cowboys. He can play both and plays both effectively. So yeah, he's been a really good player, and that was a weird pick at the time, and it just worked. So they knew what they were doing there. The Ravens at pick 25 selected Tyler Linderbaum, who pretty much everyone's criticism was like, oh, he's a little small, and do you want to draft a center that high? So the Ravens kind of just say, you know what, we'll draft a good safety and we'll draft a good center, and they did that, and they have two great players. So yeah, that works out. And then finally, the Jets at pick 26 going with Jermaine Johnson, who a lot of people thought could be like a top, I don't know, a top like 10 pick. Some mocks had him at like top 4, if I remember correctly. There was people who were saying like, oh no, the Jets are going to get him at 4. He ends up falling all the way to 26, which is kind of more around where I liked him. And, unfortunately, again, got hurt last year, was not able to do much. Did have a very good 2023 campaign. I'm still interested in seeing what he does entering his kind of contract year here. I will also say the injury being an Achilles injury, that scares me. Achilles injuries are really scary, and guys don't always bounce back from those. So hopefully he is the exception to that rule. Okay, final 6 picks. So first, Devin Lloyd with the Jaguars, who had a really weird rookie year. He actually played great starting the year and then really struggled like the second half of the year, which is not usually how that works. Second 2 years, though, he's been really good. Jaguars got a good player there at pick 27. Again, kind of the theme of this draft to some degree is don't be afraid to pick the quote-unquote less important positions if you really like the player. Sometimes just getting a good player is worth it, and he's been a good player. Devontae Wyatt has been, I think he had his best year last year with the Packers. I don't know if I would say he's a great player, but is maybe at least an effective role player for them. Cole Strange, who unfortunately I thought started to look better in year 2 after a rough year 1. Of course, famously, kind of the thought was this. The common thing said here was this is a strange pick. There's a lot of who is Cole Strange after this pick. It was considered a reach. Looked okay year 2, but then was injured and essentially missed all of last year with that injury. So yeah, that's was unfortunate. Hopefully he can get back and start playing well again. George Karlaftis at pick 30 has been a really good pick for the Chiefs. Been a really effective role player. Wouldn't be fair. He's been really good at his role of being an edge rusher who isn't there every snap, but is there enough and plays well. And then finally, a couple of picks that you kind of have to look at as misfires. Daxton Hill, who is coming off an injury. Maybe year 3 was going to be his breakout year, but ultimately has, he struggled his first couple of years, has that injury history now. So far through 3 years, you don't feel great about that pick if you're a Bengals fan. And then Lewis Cine, another guy who I thought was going to be really good when he entered the league, but ultimately the Vikings have moved off of already. He's now a Philadelphia Eagles. So yeah, not ideal there. But yeah, that is the retrospective of the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.